Hey everyone, welcome back to On Base. We are here for a very special episode today. I'm joined by Gabe Rogol, our CEO, and Paul Gibson, co-host of the On Base podcast. So across the history of the podcast, 500 is a big milestone. So really excited to bring us all together. And Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, great to speak to you again, Chris. It's amazing, 500 episodes. I mean, I've been in the Martech space for over 100 years now, so that seemed a lot. But 500 episodes, that's gone fast. And what a great guest to have to celebrate this milestone. Gabe, I know I'll let you introduce yourself, but we worked together for a long time. You're the man running Demandbase overall, and it's great to have you on this podcast. So welcome.
It's really great to be here. You are two really charismatic, interesting guys. I'm going to try to hold my own for this very special occasion. But yeah, I'm Gabe Rogol. I'm the CEO of Demandbase, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's jump straight into it. I know Demandbase have just undertaken a massive rebrand, and I'm sure many of the listeners would have been aware of that already. A rebrand isn't a small undertaking. Obviously, it's a big beast, and so I wondered if, as a starter for this episode, you could share your thinking behind Demandbase's rebrand this year, what it means for the business, and indeed for the B2B industry as a whole.
Yeah, you really don't take something like a rebrand lightly because it's a whole company initiative. And we were very intentional in the importance of this rebrand, and really that it stemmed from an greater understanding of where the market is going. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about this, but as a collective group, as people as you mentioned, in kind of the account-based marketing space for a while, account-based go-to-market space, we see a whole new phase of our industry, and with that, a greater understanding of our customers' challenges and the solution they need to be successful. And it was from that, understanding of this shift and where the market is going, that we really had a greater clarity of what we wanted to represent. And that gave us, I think, the energy, the excitement, the creativity necessary to undertake something like a massive rebrand. So it really came from kind of an understanding that we're at a whole new era of our category, and therefore a whole new era for Demandbase.
Yeah, I love that, Gabe. And one thing that you and I had a couple Zoom calls about was business has to keep running. We're doing all this work on a rebrand. We have to be focused on finding that story, pulling from the history of Demandbase, the best elements, bringing that forward, preparing for the future. But we still have to close the business. We still have to please our investors, our shareholders, our board. I'm curious how you think about that as CEO and some of the learnings that you have throughout this entire process.
It's a really good point, because it's not like as you go through a rebrand that magically you have a lot more resources than you have before. So I think it really comes down to prioritization. And, I guess going back to that theme of clarity as a company, what is truly most important, and how do we distill that down into, the key initiatives, and how do you make sure that the key initiatives all align with each other, right? So the rebrand isn't just about marketing, right? It's about, like we said, where the category is going, and therefore where our product is going, and therefore, where our own go-to-market is going. So we really had to be intentional, and you have to be intentional when you're going through a rebrand, as everything you're doing, across all the different dynamics of a company, truly supporting the direction you're taking with the rebrand. So I think it was a great exercise in focus, to decide what is important in moving us forward, and what can we stop doing. But even so, as you know, Chris, it was stressful because you were in the center of it. But the whole process was really, I think, an amazing exercise in clarifying thinking and focus, which is really where execution comes from.
Yeah, that's great points, Gabe. And obviously, when you look at rebrands, everyone thinks the look and feel, the color schemes changing, whatever it may be. Maybe the logo gets an update, but there was a lot more behind this as well. The messaging was updated, the vision and the mission that we looked at as a business as we evolved changed as well. Would you mind sharing a few ideas around that, the concept behind the changes we made there?
Yeah. So, going back to kind of my initial point around a vision of where the category is going, we've been a leader in what's been known as account-based marketing for a long time. And therefore, we've seen a lot of success in our customers realizing the potential of account-based marketing, but also a lot of challenges. And, as we've moved to this new phase, we really got a greater understanding of who are the companies that really can be successful with an account-based approach. And I'm going to shift to an account-based go-to-market approach because I think one of the things that is kind of essential to the rebrand is, we believe there's been some challenges in the naming of ABM because it's not just a marketing thing, and we'll talk more about that. But understanding who can be successful with an account-based go-to-market, what problems did it solve, and essentially, what an account-based go-to-market is all about is aligning go-to-market resources, your go-to-market resources, your sales and marketing teams, your operations teams, your post-sales teams, to the accounts that can drive the greatest lifetime value for your business when you have a complex go-to-market. That means when every account matters. Maybe you have an expensive solution, a solution that involves a lot of stakeholders externally and internally to be procured, that takes a lot of work and services to be successful once you have sold your solution. You have multiple products. When you have that type of go-to-market, every account matters, and it's really complex and difficult, we found, to align all your resources to that right message and that right product that's going to be sold to your customers when they have complex businesses as well. And so in thinking about that, what we believe are the companies that are really going to be successful are really those companies that have a complex go-to-market. And what do they need? They need a trusted partner because they're working with large, complex businesses. They need a product that is open, that can bring data in and out of their other tech, other elements of the tech stack. A brand that's flexible, a product and platform that's powerful, that can work with diverse and different internal landscapes. A brand that helps align sales and marketing, one that's transparent, so it doesn't feel like a black box. So these are kind of the pillars: transparency, being powerful, being open, aligning, being trusted. These are the kind of things we hear over and over of the companies that can be successful with an account-based go-to-market. That's the partner that they need, and really that was the genesis and the idea and the core essence of the company that we really have been, but we wanted to articulate more in our product vision, in our messaging, in our go-to-market, and in this rebrand.
That's
great stuff there.
I was being out in the field day to day as I am. It's great to hear that we've taken that approach, because we hear a lot of companies that maybe they'll invest in a platform and then it straitjackets them, that they can't evolve as they want to in the future, or their sales teams are going off on wild goose chases because a black box approach, as you said, is driving them to chase opportunities that aren't real. So I think the fact that as a business we identified that is very positive, and the fact as a business our strategy is addressing that, I think, is really exciting for the industry. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to talk over you there.
No, you were perfect. I actually wanted to pose a question to both of you before we jump into the future and how we're pulling this into the future. I'm really curious Paul, you hit on messaging, and Gabe, you were talking about the vision and the strategy, and we're going to talk more about that. For the folks who are listening, marketing and sales leaders, I'd love to hear just any of those takeaways before we transition into how we're going forward with this, of what a CEO can do to help in the process. And then, Paul, specifically, Gabe, I know you are a sales leader too and have been a sales leader, but Paul, for you too, as a leader of an amazing sales team that's always crushing it, what are some of the considerations that folks leading a rebrand should think about going forward? So, Gabe, we'll start with you, just the CEO perspective, and then Paul, I'd love for you to hit on that before we talk about what's next.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really, we've hit on this point, but it's worth repeating. It takes up so many company cycles. So you have to, I think you have your choice in going forward with it has to be that you see a major transformation in your industry and in your company. And you have to be really disciplined and kind of ruthless in your prioritization. I think you also have to be very open to the process and open to, you're doing a rebrand because you want to change and evolve. And, as a CEO, you're attached to some of the things that you've done before. So being open-minded and patient, because it is kind of it's a creative endeavor, and therefore you have to really suss out all the reasons and aspects that you're doing it, which takes time and takes research internally and externally. I've found that kind of trusting my gut on what I really don't like while being skeptical or on what I do like has been a good mental model for me, because if there's something that I immediately don't like, or probably others maybe don't like, but if there's something I do like, there may be something better. So that was kind of a bit of a mental model. And then I think hopefully, Chris, you can appreciate this. Once it's completed, how do you kind of give the team a breather, but also kind of move on to the next exciting thing, so there's not a big letdown in the process. So those are some of the things that kind of I've thought about. But I think the bottom line is you have to be patient and allow the creative ideas to flourish and come to fruition and land on something, while really speaking up if there's something you really don't like.
That's great. And I suppose I'd add, Chris, a couple of things. One, I think Demandbase is a brand that is well known and trusted in the industry. And sometimes people know Demandbase, but they're not quite sure what they do or what they offer to a business. So I think if rebranding as we did, part of that strategy, I think, was to make sure that people really understood the benefits we offer to the B2B world, which I think is really important. The other thing is, if you're going down the route as we have done and rebranding, we want to get that brand awareness out there. But so many organizations I see do brand awareness for companies that in reality they can never sell to. And indeed, they have no desire to sell to because they're not a good fit. And I have quite a lot of back and forth with brand marketers who say, I want my brand to go here, there, and everywhere. That's great. But if you're a B2B with limited time, budget, and resource, and you only sell into financial institutions, you've got to be a bit smarter. And when you're doing a brand awareness, you should focus that on the banks and financial institutions you can actually sell to, rather than throwing it out in generic campaigns that may be hitting more people, but most of them may be relevant. So I think from a CEO, it's yes, we want to rebrand, but we want to make sure that brand is getting out in front of the people we want, because there's nothing worse than inviting in people that you can't actually sell to, because it will show false positives that they're going on your website and looks like we've got an increase in traffic from our brand launch, but actually it's companies we can't sell to, and they may actually end up in pipeline as well. So you get the sales team chasing after opportunities that they can't close, and if they ever did close them, they'd be a bad fit for the business. So I think from a CEO perspective, it's important, if we're rebranding and we're getting that messaging out there, let's make sure we're focusing on those companies we really want that message to go to.
Great stuff there. I'd love for us to talk about the future. So let's jump into this, Gabe. I'll ask the first question. I know Paul will have a bunch here because Paul, this is kind of your talk track too. You're talking to customers about this, prospects about this every single day. But with the future of account-based go-to-market, you mentioned that earlier, Gabe. So instead of just pure ABM, what are some of the challenges and gaps that you see enterprises facing today with their go-to-market models?
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to talk to, thousands of companies and some of the biggest brands in the world, B2B brands. And out of that, there's some really interesting challenges in the account-based go-to-market. At a high level, um, I think we're at this interesting point where there's a lot of acknowledgement about the problems that account-based go-to-market solves, which is what I mentioned, aligning your resources to the accounts that drive the greatest lifetime value. So on the one hand, I think you see a lot of agreement that we need to have technology and approaches that solve that. On the other hand, I think some companies have success with it and some companies don't. And the common challenges that I see, I think at the highest level, really breaks down to it's an account-based go-to-market ends up being treated as a tactic versus a strategy. And we were, when we were talking about branding, rebrand, we were clear that when you're going to do a rebrand, that's a business initiative, that's a strategy. And at the C level, you have a few amount of kind of those business initiatives that you can do at one time. And I really advocate that an account-based approach has to be a C-level strategic initiative in order to pull together, the different function areas, sales, marketing, operations, product that you need to be successful. So too often it ends up just being a tactic as opposed to a strategy. And then, how does that manifest? And we really see there's 5 key challenges that appear over and over again uh, with an account-based approach because it's treated like a tactic. First is the measurement. Often companies really default to measuring whether they're successful by measuring leads. And it's ironic because really the origin or the genesis of account-based was to get away from the bad lead problem. Because if you optimize to leads, you're going to end up with accounts that really can't buy your solution and or people within those companies that can't, aren't relevant or aren't senior enough to really drive the decision making. So it does exactly what you don't want it to do. Now, it should be a KPI, but it shouldn't be the focus of your measurement. You got to focus on a whole funnel of things that you're doing around the accounts that matter, from engagement to on the right content to sales and marketing, campaign responses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first, a focus on leads, which makes an account-based approach a tactic. The second is it ends up being account-based focused mostly too often on just new logo acquisition. And new logo acquisition is just a part of your go-to-market. And in fact, as you get bigger, most of your revenue will come from your customer base. And some of the most successful use cases of account-based are retention related and are cross-sell and upsell related. What product to sell next to what customer, solving that problem. So that's the second challenge, is make it a whole go-to-market thing, not just a new logo thing. The third challenge we see is, intent data is great. It's a big part of our product suite. However, I think it's been overpromised, and often account-based becomes just synonymous with using intent data. Like here's the accounts that matter based on intent. And intent data is just a tactic. It just shows interest of companies, and those companies that are interested are not necessarily your ideal customer profile. It's not the same thing. There can be companies that are interested that aren't in your ICP, And there can be ICP companies that aren't interested, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't focus on them. And in addition, there's many other data sets that indicate whether a company is ready to buy, including engagement on your website, maybe technographic data, firmographic data that make it a good fit. Intent should be a part of an overall data strategy, not the whole strategy. And we see an over-reliance on intent. So that's the third challenge. The fourth challenge goes back to the naming of ABM and the M, which stands for marketing. And it's not just a marketing thing. And too often it becomes just a marketing thing, and therefore it's not a strategy. I have this thing is don't blame the CMO, because it's got to be a CEO level thing. I believe, as I mentioned, it's got to be a strategy to pull in sales, marketing, operations to really orchestrate aligning with the accounts that matter. And then the fifth is, too often an account-based approach is kind of put together in isolation of your tech stack strategy. And what you really want to do is weave insights and technology across your tech stack so that there's a common set of data and insights that touches all the key functional areas: sales, marketing, ops, as we've talked about, post-sales, and in a common way, and can activate actions across your tech stack. And what happens is ABM ends up being, or account-based go-to-market ends up being, a series of point solutions because there's not a strategic seat at the table. So those are the 5 key challenges. And again, I think they fall into the larger bucket of, is this a C-suite initiative? And is it something that has a seat at the technology table? Is this looked at strategically from a tech stack standpoint?
And all of those, Gabe, are really, really interesting, because as I think, again, day to day, as we're out there talking to people, all of those really resonate. I mean, starting at the beginning of that, the number of B2B organizations that measure using B2C metrics doesn't make any sense, right? You get an anonymous click-through rate of 0.7% and say, hey, our campaigns are working. Well, who's clicking on that ad? Is it even anyone that's relevant? So I think that approach, we need to see maybe more B2B companies having a B2B view of measurement. I think the lead thing is still massive. The number of organizations we speak to say, I want more leads. The reality is they don't want more leads, they want more conversions. So what you need to do is get better quality pipeline into the mix, if you like. And that customer thing, more and more of our clients now, I mean, it's not a rocket science to know that once you've taken the time to invest and win a new customer, keeping them and upselling them and expanding them and retaining them is a much more profitable way for a business than going after new customers. So I think that is a really big one. And the ads, the intent thing is really fascinating. I had a conversation with a VP of sales a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she's been giving intent to her sales team for about 6 months, and it was described as like giving a sat nav to your sales team in their car, and but it's driven by this black box AI engine, and more often than not, it sends you off down dark alleyways and dead ends, and eventually the sales team get fed up and they turn that sat nav off and they go back to their old fashioned researching a map to find out what to do. So it actually destroys the chance of using intent because they lose trust in it, and then it starts to have a negative effect on sales and marketing alignment. And the last one, I really think advertising to companies that you can't sell to makes no sense, right? You have to think about it. If I'm going to be running an advertising campaign, I need to be focusing that on the companies that we, a business, can sell to. So going from the spray and pray advertising approach to an account-based approach makes sense. So that account-based thing is a huge element. And to your point, Gabe, this isn't just for marketing people. If sales get the confidence that everything that's coming to them in pipeline is an account that they can actually sell to, that gives them much more confidence, much more likely to be successful, and the deals that they're closing are much more likely to renew because it's a company that's a good fit and therefore there's value. So I think all of those key challenges you've identified, both from a strategic high level, which is where you look at it, and then on the ground, if you like, day to day, the way I see it, it really does align to what we're seeing today.
Yeah, those are really great points. And for those, in the US, sat nav is GPS.
Yes, of
But
course.
and going back to intent. So going back to intent, I think, I hear that over and over again, which is marketing team, provides sales with intent, and then, sales tries to call in and there was no interest or we can't find the person. And I think that the answer to that is kind of what I was getting at, is integrating intent within transparent AI models that include other key data sets. If you're a technology company, understanding technographic data is really important. For all companies, understanding the firmographic data, of the companies that can buy your product is really important. Understanding and overlaying website engagement on key pages on your website is really important. Having tools that recommend buying groups, so like who are the buyers at the companies your sales team is reaching out to. All those things support and augment intent data to make it much more effective from an account-based approach. But in isolation, it's just a signal.
Yep, absolutely. So everything we've spoken about, Gabe, this seems really relevant, and I know the people listening will think so too. I think it'd be really useful if you don't mind. How does the continued evolution of demand base, where we are today, where we're heading, product wise, strategy wise, messaging wise, is aiming to address those challenges that we just covered off?
It's really interesting to look back at, the history of the account, what's been called the account-based marketing category, what we call the account-based go-to-market, and demand base, within that, and how it's evolved to solve those kind of 5 challenges that I mentioned. And it's really clear to me that we're entering a fourth phase right now, phase 4 of the account-based go-to-market, which I think will unlock more potential to kind of align companies to the accounts that matter most than it's ever had before. But looking back to like how we got here, phase 1, I call the phase of account identification and targeting, and that was really 2012 to 2016. And Demandbase was fortunate. We introduced the first account identification data set, which de-anonymizes digital traffic to understand the accounts that were on your website, and also introduced the first ad product to target accounts. And really the goal of that was to help solve the bad lead problem that we talked about earlier. It's not just about leads, it's about accounts and understanding, which traffic sources are driving the most accounts, the best accounts, how do you engage them better, and how do you get more to your website. And that was a huge advance at the time. But each one of these phases kind of ran into like the limit that pushed it to the next phase. So I think what we heard and through that phase towards the end of it is, well, so what? Like the accounts are on our website, they're engaging, like, what should we really do? And from there, we entered into the phase of intent and account selection. And that was 2016 to 2020. And really, that was when we introduced the first keyword-based intent. And that enabled companies to understand what their accounts in their universe, in their total addressable market, were interested in. And therefore, they could start to prioritize accounts to deliver on that so what for the sales organization, and group accounts in audiences by common interests and target them and send message based on those interests. So it provided a lot more actionability for go-to-market teams. But what we started to run into, in terms of a challenge there, was it was siloed. And if we go back to what I was talking about in terms of, being strategic with the tech stack, it really wasn't bringing in the solution at that point, first-party data. So, that's when, we moved into what I call the platform phase of the account-based go-to-market, 2020 to 2024, which we're kind of just kind of at the end of. And that's when, we did a series of acquisitions that enabled us to have kind of all the first-party data integrated into our platform, all third-party data that we have available to us, which is contact data, firmographic data, intent data, technographic data, account identification data, all of that available native in our platform, to be able to combine that to create or account orchestration, to create journey stages that show how accounts move through your customer journey, to integrate with other platforms, all that stuff, all really the assets needed to fulfill the mission of an account-based go-to-market. And we really kind of put together an approach that can integrate with your tech stack. And the challenge that we're starting to see, we're seeing now that kind of enters us into phase 4 is, it's complex and manual. And so how do we automate that? And that's really where we're going, with phase 4.
Yeah, I love that, Gabe. And I think it leads beautifully into the future of account-based and how you think account-based go-to-market is going to change based on what's going on in the B2B space and bringing phase 4 to life.
I'm more excited than I've ever been, because I think we're on the cusp of being able to, fulfill the potential of an account-based approach more than ever. And it's because we're entering this phase 4, and I call that the phase of automation and insights. And really, that's going to be about automating, the everything I talked about in phase 3, so that we can deliver 3 key groups of insights to our customers. And those insights are audience insights, message-based insights, and action-based insights. So audience-based insights are, what are the accounts that can buy what product, by region. They're also, who are the people within those accounts? And very important, who are the buying groups? Because as you have a complex go-to-market, different products, you're going to have different buying groups within the account. So those are audience-based insights. Second are message-based insights. So what are the messages that you have to deliver to those different people, buying groups, accounts, that at different points through different functional areas within your company? And then third, action-based insights. So what should happen based on where these accounts and people and buying groups are next across your different functional areas? And all those insights have to weave their way as a through line through your tech stack, and so that there's coordination and efficiency of resources going in the right direction. So the insights are key. Next, what's really important in that phase 4 platform is the data. The data, the bringing together the first and third party data, so there's a commonality across all your functional areas, and an overlay of AI that creates those insights. And then the third part of the phase 4 platform is, where do those insights go? And they have to be delivered in our own demand-based native applications. They have to be delivered through partner applications, Salesforce, Dynamics, HubSpot, Marketo, Gong, etc. And then, very important, especially for global enterprise, they have to be delivered in your data warehouse or CDP, because a platform like Demandbase or any of these phase 4 platforms that will emerge are never going to have all your data. And so we're going to have to be able to deliver these insights in a way that works in your broader AI strategy. And that means getting into your data warehouse and getting into the CDP so they can be actualized across your go-to-market. So that's how I see, the phase 4 vision. Implicit in that, as we talk about the future of account-based in general, your data strategy is really, really important, because obviously AI is huge. It's a game changer. We know it's going to be the future, but it's only going to be as good as the data you have available. And right now, unfortunately, most companies have a lot of dirty data and mismatched data. So I think, the future of account-based is very much going to be a focus on your data strategy. I mentioned buying groups. I think that's going to be a huge unlock, especially like I said, as you had multiple product groups and having understanding buying groups is going to and having that be kind of a equal partner to accounts and people as a data object in your tech stack. I do think kind of componentized platforms are going to be important, meaning how can I use flexible platforms that can work in my tech stack and not platforms that I grow out of. Um, and then, kind of maybe a broader one is, a lot of companies' business models are changing. It's kind of, we've had this big era of SaaS business models. And I think you see more and more companies going to usage-based models or combination models. And, how is that going to affect the way that you land and expand in accounts? How is that going to affect your messaging? That going to affect your measures? And I think kind of moving out of the pure SaaS era for a lot of technology companies is going to be a big part of their account-based approach. So those are some of the things I think about in terms of the future.
That's exciting. Knowing what's coming and having seen behind the scenes what we're doing as a business in our platform, I think is really exciting. I think the future. Everyone seems to be a little bit afraid of AI, but if we're using it in the proper way, it's going to take away so many of those manual, time-consuming efforts that as sales and marketers we have to get involved in, and allow us to do what we really want to do, which is sales and marketing. So I think that's really exciting. And it's amazing, buying groups seems to be in pretty much every discussion we have these days. And it makes sense, right? Why would you want to chase after people who aren't actually part of that decision-making process that you're going to be working to with an organization? So I think you hit some really good points on there, and I'm really excited to see where we go in the future. It's always that horrible time because I think we've just started the conversation and scratching the surface, and there's so much I think me and Chris want to pick your brains on, but we have a time limit today, and I think we're coming to the end of it. So maybe we should set up another one, Chris, so we can get Gabe on again. In the interim, so just a couple of things I think would be really useful for the listeners. Firstly, obviously you've been in the space for a long time. You probably spend a lot of time reading, looking at blogs, podcasts, newsletters, etc. Are there any that you would recommend that listeners should follow?
Yeah. I mean, actually, before we were on, I think Chris, you mentioned he was a guest, but John Common in the Growth Drivers podcast. He gets some really good guests that go in depth on these things in a way that I don't think happens a lot. So I'd recommend that Growth Drivers podcast.
Great one. And we also love to ask tech recommendations. So I know you're CEO of a technology company. So Demandbase may be one, but what are some of the tools and technologies that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I mean, I've been using Google Gemini, quite a bit. It's cool, because, where you have like the Google workspaces and it just, right there is in your workspace and pulls in, all the stuff that Gemini does, on the web, but then also all your internal docs too. And so I've been really getting into Google Gemini.
Awesome. So we last thing really, we hear and we had some great guests on, and hearing what you're talking about is really fascinating for the listeners. Who do you recommend we should interview next? Any pointers?
I'm going to go with some other demand basers. And I don't know if you've done this, but our expert team. So, we have a group of practitioners that are just, top notch and I think understand how to actually make an account-based approach successful. So the great Tom Keefe, great Jay Toole, Stephanie MacArthur. I don't know if you've had these folks on. Maybe you could do a roundtable because they all have different approaches. Tom has the MOPS, Jay has the SDR approach, Stephanie has kind of the demand gen approach. And I think hearing from practitioners of like how to be actually successful would be really valuable to listeners.
That's a great
Shout out to our expert team.
Yeah. Yeah, aptly named. And then the most important question of all, for everyone listening who wants to get in touch with you, Gabe, what's the best way to get in touch with you after the podcast?
LinkedIn. Yeah, no, I'm definitely active on LinkedIn. I hopefully you can hear I'm really excited about where the category is going, where technology is going, where demand base is going. So I'm definitely been putting a lot of thinking into writing and engaging with people on LinkedIn. So please reach out and let's engage on LinkedIn.
I follow you, Gabe, and your posts are always insightful. So it's not a sales post; it's always a relevant post based on the industry. So definitely check out those ones.
Appreciate that.
Yes, Gabe is setting the gold standard for us to follow on LinkedIn. So I do feel some guilt when I check LinkedIn, Gabe. So well done there.
Appreciate it. You've been such a huge driver for Demandbase, and I want to thank you, Chris, for being so instrumental in our rebrand. I know it was a labor of love, and we love you at Demandbase. So thank you.
Agreed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've loved you both from the beginning. So Paul and I have always been back channeling. I would just recommend in closing here for anyone doing a rebrand, you have to have strong relationships with your executive team, with your sales leaders. You need to be talking to them a lot because look, they're in this all day, every day. They're talking to customers, and there's no way you can get in a room and just be creative without that feedback. So thank you both for being great partners in the process.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was.
It turned out great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both, and especially Gabe as our guest of honor on our 500th episode. I think it was a really good one. Thank you everyone for listening, and keep an eye out because alongside that roundtable that Gabe recommended, lots of other good guests coming as well. So appreciate you taking the time to listen to us and look forward to the next one.